Hello and welcome to this episode of Divorce Discussions. And this is one of those topics that is kind of a trigger for some people, but I think it's something that's really, really important we need to talk about. So I have an expert on today. Her name is Randy Rolfe, and Randy is a veteran speaker on nutrition, parenting, and life skills. She's the author of 9 acclaimed books, most recently, The Single Ingredient Diet: Transform Your Relationship to Food in Just 21 Days. Dying to find out more about that one. She has appeared in over 50 network TV talk shows and hundreds of radio and podcast shows. She's a natural health advocate, family counselor. For over 5 decades, Randy brings her message to the next generation so that they can take control of their health and lead vibrant lives. Randy, welcome.
Thank you, Marty. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, and like I say, food is one of those things that it's so stressful at times, but it's such a part of our life, right? We can't go without food. So tell us a little bit about what got you into this particular area, because you've got a wide scope of expertise. So why the food?
Yes, it's a great question, and it's very interesting that you're focusing on that time of life that many women go through with divorce. My first career was as an attorney. And so I saw this and I knew the background of it legally, and it is very, very trying. And but I have been married 55 years. So for me,
congratulations.
Thank you. But when I was practicing law, I discovered that my colleagues kept asking questions because I told them I was reading about nutrition because I was trying to learn how to cook for me and my husband. And I had so much more fun doing that than writing legal briefs that I eventually switched to sharing what I'd learned about nutrition. Meanwhile, I had my own kids and was feeding them whole natural foods. And people were asking me why our children were so calm and slept well and didn't get sick. And so I started teaching parenting and good communication as well as the nutrition. So I've been doing that for over 40 years, teaching families how to feed their families to get along, and adults too. Often it's been such a stressful time pre-divorce and then afterwards that it's a crucial thing to self-care, something that often divorced women have not been doing very well. So because of the stresses of going through that transition. So I love helping people learn how to feed their bodies what they really need so that they can really enjoy food. It's one of the things we're supposed to enjoy. We would have died long ago if we didn't like to eat. And so I love doing it. So I've written about parenting and about nutrition and about relationships. And but I really focus on getting rid of some of the popular myths that keep people from taking good care of themselves through diet.
Yeah. And so I always think I love this as a starting question because it's so interesting to see how people's lives have evolved to get them from maybe what we thought we wanted when we were getting, out of high school. You did a law degree, I did an education degree, and then how do we end up here, where we're doing something completely different? So I always think that's interesting. But, this whole relationship with food and the family thing, I really believe, and I know that research shows that, how we see food has a lot to do with how we saw food when we were kids and how our families did food. It's interesting because I grew up in a family where we farmed part-time, lived in town part-time, but we always had very healthy food. So it was like, meat, potatoes, vegetables. But my mom was very sick all my life. And so she needed to eat to gain weight. So things like desserts became a big thing in our family because it was what mom enjoyed eating. And so we all ate it. And it's funny because that was the first thing that I let go when I moved out of the house was I don't eat desserts anymore. I just don't. I don't know why, but that that whole remembering mom being sick and eating those desserts just kind of turned me off desserts completely. So, yeah, but you're talking about really helping families choose the healthier foods.
Yes, definitely. Yes, many people who go back to the idea of real food have had somewhat of a background like you, with the having been familiar with the farming and the real food that comes out of the ground with a lot of work. But that's how we form our habits and our thoughts about food do go back to our childhood, and that's why I like to talk about parenting and nutrition at the same time, because we as parents influence how our kids are going to be eating when they're 30 or 50 or 70.
Yeah.
And it sometimes you have to break that learning when it's very misleading. And I've one of the things I try to emphasize is people say, oh, well, mom had diabetes or grandmom had cancer. But that doesn't mean it's in your genes. It may mean that their diet was poor, or
Right.
they did a lot of emotional eating, and maybe they were in a poverty situation, and we're just getting by on processed foods. So you need to look at your cultural history, not just think it's genetic. Oh dear, I'm going to get this problem because my ancestors had it. My grandfather had a heart attack, so will I. That's not necessarily true, and we know now from science that you can influence what genes are most activated. And if you have a strong immune system, for instance, or a good digestion, you're much less likely to develop a chronic condition.
Yeah. And what do you say to, and I really appreciate that you pointed out something there, Randy, that I'd like to highlight. A lot of times people feel bad because the only thing that they can afford are highly processed foods because they tend to be very cheap. Like honestly, when most of us went through, if we went through college and lived on our own, we lived on ramen noodles and Kraft dinner. I mean, that was basically what we lived on, right? So I get frustrated when I hear a lot of people saying, well, you have to eat whole organic fruits and vegetables and grass-fed meats and all this kind of stuff. And that's just really not realistic for a lot of people who don't have it's not realistic for most people with even with moderate incomes anymore because of the price of this kind of stuff. So how do you help families who maybe are or individuals who are maybe struggling with that concern about how do I stretch my food dollar if fresh fruits and vegetables and grass-fed meats and stuff are so darn expensive at the grocery store?
Yeah, well, when I first started teaching nutrition, I was volunteering with the federal food program, and so I had a lot of people coming in that said we can't afford the good food. But it's a transition, really, because you can get excellent nutrition from less expensive food if you know how to do it. And it so many people live snack to snack almost, and it seems to be cheaper, but your body is degenerating from the poor quality. So if you can make that transition to re-educate your digestion and your mind and your appetite, then you don't have to snack, and you can eat really high quality food. And like I remember I had one client in the WIC program that she accused me of trying to poison her with eggs. She was pregnant, and I said, eggs are a great source of protein. And she said, but there's cholesterol in it. And I'm like, well, that's one of those myths that we need to deal with, because eggs are the finest protein that you can get inexpensively, and they've gone up in price too, but they're still very cheap as a source of protein. And the cholesterol is balanced in an egg. And if it's a relatively fresh egg, your body will handle that properly. The liver makes cholesterol. So it's not that cholesterol you eat, it's how the body is transformed by the processed food.
Yeah.
Actually, your cholesterol goes up when you're on a high sugar diet. So it's learning, it's re-educating, and realizing that good food, unfortunately, the way we distribute it in this country, we do have food deserts, and it's a
Yes.
real problem.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean, I mean, oatmeal is actually a really, really good food, and it's very cheap, even organic
Yeah.
oatmeal.
So switch out from the bag cereal with all the sugar. Get a big tub of Quaker oats or whatever off-brand
Yeah.
rolled oats or steel cut oats you can get. And that, if you have a bowl of oatmeal and a boiled egg, you're full until lunch, or a couple of boiled eggs, because you got your
Yes.
protein, you got your what do you call that? Complex carbohydrates, right? You got fiber,
Yes.
and you just feel full.
Fat, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And fat is high quality fat is very satisfying. And people say, oh, but per gram, it has twice as many calories, but it's more than twice as satisfying.
Right.
And so if you have a little butter in your oatmeal, it makes it even more satisfying.
Yeah. And I love those little tips. Are there any I've got to ask you, because you have written this one ingredient book, right? Tell us a little bit about that, if you, because the title is just so interesting.
Yes, it generates a lot of curiosity. So I'm glad I chose it. I woke up one morning thinking, what's this one simplest thing I could tell somebody to change their diet completely to good food? And I said, well, just don't buy anything that has more than one ingredient listed. So, apples or a fillet of fish, that's one ingredient. And um, start with that. And that's what the 21 days is. Try to be really strict about that for a while. Then you can, it just for 3 weeks, but that'll re-educate the way you think about food, because we get kind of complacent when we read an ingredient list that has 20 ingredients, and half of them are chemical, petrochemicals out of a lab. And the other half is usually highly refined starch or sugar or oils, so that the vitamins and minerals have to be put back and they're lab created. So you get this long ingredient list, but then you think, well, it can't be that bad because the government allows it. Well, that's not really true. It can be that bad. And the food processing industry has a lot of control over the regulators. They tell you to eat well, but they never tell you to just uh, eat things that have one ingredient.
Yeah.
And so then if you want to buy a dressing or something, if it's just things you could put together for yourself out of single ingredients, that's okay. You can do some labor saving, but just realize you don't need any of those additives or the highly refined foods.
That's a great strategy. And that's something that I like that you can, as long as you can put everything together in your own kitchen, if that's all that's on the bottle or the can or the jar or whatever, then that's going to be qualifying. I love that. The tip that I got, and I can't remember where I got this, may have been when many years ago, like 30 years ago, I went to Weight Watchers, and there was some really helpful tips. I remember one thing they said is only shop the exterior of the grocery store. Don't ever go into the aisles, because not the bad food, but the processed food is in the aisles. So if you think about that, those are those one ingredient foods that are on the outside, right? So
Yes, that's true. That's good advice. Yes, and I was an educator with Nutrisystems for a year or so, and they were just excited to hear that the real food it actually helps your body balance itself better,
yeah,
so that your brain is clearer. You didn't get these terrible cravings or have to have a snack because your energy has dived. So if you're eating quality protein and quality fat, your body can stay balanced.
right.
So
What
yeah,
do you
so
think? Oh, sorry, Randy, I'm cutting you off. Go ahead.
no, I was just saying, and you're absolutely right. You go around the outside, and on Easter maybe you'll go into that Easter aisle, but otherwise,
What do you think are some of the biggest and we're almost at the end, but what are some of the biggest kind of myths that you hear people believe about food or diet or nutrition, whether it's feeding ourselves as adults or feeding a family?
Oh, I love the question because these myths get in the way. Well, one is that we're weak-willed and lazy. We don't exercise enough, and that's why we're all putting on weight. Um, the lack of exercise hasn't changed in the last 40 years, but the obesity has gone like this. And it's the food. But there's actually efforts by the food processing companies to convince us that it's just our sedentary ways and our weak wills that we can't resist the sugary stuff. Well, it's the food that makes us that way. If you're eating sugar, your brain's going to say, oh, where's the glucose? And you're going to want more sugar. And if you say, well, oh, I feel guilty because I didn't go to the fitness center yesterday, well, they want you to feel that way. The food makes you feel that way because it robs you of your energy. You just don't have that energy today. So you don't have the get up and go, but it's not because that's your natural character. It's because of the food you're eating. And I always tell people, think of a 4-year-old, you have to make them sit still. In schools, they give them drugs to sit them still. Um, but they're full of energy and curiosity, and they'll eat if they're hungry. So it's really about the food that makes the difference. And once you make this transition to real whole foods, you'll have the energy. You'll feel like taking a walk, and you don't have to join an expensive club. You can just go out and take a walk. And all the studies show that just a half hour of a walk 5 times a day gives you that movement, but it's the diet that's making us sick.
Yeah.
So those are related. That somehow exercise is why we're getting heavy, and that it's not really diet. You can eat what you want. No, no, no. And you even hear athletes say, "Well, I can eat anything because I do a marathon every 2 weeks." No, they have to eat even more carefully because that kind of performance is a burden and a stress on the body, and you need even better nutrition. And athletes that have a long career know that.
Yeah. I read somewhere or somebody told me you can't, what was the saying that they used now? You can't out exercise a bad diet, or you can't outrun a bad diet. That was what it was. Yeah.
Yes, I
Yeah.
like that one.
And I
And
don't
it got a lot of pushback. It was a major article in the British Medical Journal, and it got all kinds of pushback from the fitness industry and from the processed foods industry that, oh, no, exercise is so important. And because they want us to feel guilty that we're just putting on weight because we're not exercising. But if you look at our lifestyle, um, people are not exercising less than they did 40 years ago when the obesity epidemic started. But what did change in the 80s was the ultra processed foods.
right.
And it started when the tobacco industry started using their knowledge about taste and color and stimulating the taste buds. They got into the ultra processed foods in
I
the
I don't
80s.
know. Yeah, I wish that was more public, that the tobacco companies own most of the food processing companies as well.
Well, they did. When they started losing the smoke and lung cases, they actually pulled back because they realized, and they've actually have notes from their corporate records that they were warned that they'll start blaming us, the processed foods, for the health epidemic, the disease epidemic. So they've kind of backed off, but the other processors have said, well, we learned so much from now,
Right.
we can
Right.
keep going.
And I think, it's always shocking when you start reading labels to find out all the different things that sugar is in. The other day I was comparing, I wanted to buy some, just breakfast sausage stuff. And I was looking at sausages. Now you wouldn't think, like kielbasa and garlic sausage, but there was sugar in almost all of those. Now it's not a whole lot, but if everything you eat has just a little bit of sugar in it, over time you get a lot of sugar. And so I think, being more aware. Yeah.
And it misleads the body, because every time you take, even if it's a small amount, the body has to figure out what to do with it. And the body protects the level of sugar in the blood very carefully. So if you get insulin every time you take a little sugar and try to push the sugar out of the blood, then you get insulin resistance, where the cells don't want it all the time. So then your energy drops and you want a snack. So it's a vicious circle that we have to break out of.
Yeah. Yeah. Randy, this has been so interesting. I have a feeling we could talk for a lot longer on this, and we'll have to do that. I'll have to get you to come back on the podcast. But can you just tell people, if they want to get hold of you or they want to learn more about what you do and your expertise, what's the best way to reach out or to reach you?
Well, everything is on randyrolfe.com. And also I have a free training at singleingredientdiet.com, 13-minute training all about it. And of course, we have the book. And I have a course on the book, an online course. And if you go to singleingredientdiet.com, you'll learn about the course as well.
Great. And is your book available on Amazon, or is it through your website?
Oh, it's on Amazon.
Okay.
All my books are on. Yeah.
So that's always a great central place for people to go to find information too, but definitely check out the website first. And Randy, thank you so much for all your time and your expertise. And this has been a really thought-provoking and educational program. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I love what you're doing. That's so important to help women regenerate their lives when they've had a blow.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for listening in to this episode of Divorce Discussions. And don't forget to tune in to the next one.